Football has given us some unforgettable moments. From Diego Maradona's hand of God to Sergio Aguero's title-winning moment to Lionel Messi finally lifting the World Cup after years of heartbreak. Moments so extraordinary that it almost feels scripted at times. But here's the thing about football, and here is the beauty about football, that football isn't scripted. And maybe that's why the greatest stories ever told in football are the ones nobody could have ever imagined. And 17 years ago, football accidentally created one of those stories. In 2007, a 20-year-old Lionel Messi arrived for what seemed like an ordinary charity photo shoot. The photo shoot was organized by FC Barcelona, UNICEF, and Diario Sport. And the idea of it was quite simple. Messi would pose for a calendar with a randomly selected baby who had won a charity raffle. There were no television cameras following him around, no documentary crew trying to capture history, and certainly no one who believed this photo shoot would ever matter beyond raising money for charity. To Messi, it was just another obligation after training, and to the baby's parents, it was just another once in a lifetime opportunity. Back then, I'm sure neither of them were aware that they had just become part of football history. If I showed you this photograph back in 2007, the first thing you would probably ask would probably just be a simple question. I wonder what happened to that baby. Maybe he grew up supporting Barcelona. Maybe he just went on to become a doctor or an engineer or just live another simple life. I mean, throughout the years, we've seen babies posed for photographs with famous athletes. Almost none of them went on to become athletes themselves. But this baby was different, because this baby's name was Lamine Yamal.
Yamal a toujours le ballon. Lamine Yamal s'est retourné, il va tenter l'accélération. Yamal est passé une première fois. Yamal voilà le réveil.
17 years later, that same baby wouldn't just become a professional footballer. He would become Barcelona's brightest young star. He would inherit Lionel Messi's position on the right wing. He would wear the number 10 shirt that Messi made legendary. And now, in the biggest twist football has ever written, he will stand across from the very man who once held him in his arms in a FIFA World Cup final. Football has given us legendary rivalries. Pele and Cruyff never met on a World Cup stage. Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo defined an entire generation, yet they never faced each other at a World Cup. And somehow, by complete accident, football created something even more poetic. Arguably the greatest player of our generation, set to face the baby he unknowingly held 20 years ago in his very own arms in the biggest stage of football, the FIFA World Cup final. And the most incredible part about this is that this story didn't just begin with that photograph. It began in an academy called La Masia in Barcelona. Because as unbelievable as that photo is, this isn't the only parallel connecting Lionel Messi and Lamine Yamal. They both arrived at the Barcelona academy as quiet, left-footed boys with unbelievable talent. Both of them broke into the Barca team as teenagers, starting off wearing the number 19 shirt and then eventually inheriting the iconic number 10 shirt at FC Barcelona. One of them carried Barcelona into its greatest era in history, and the other is now responsible of bringing back their greatest era. Looking back now, it almost feels like that football wasn't just taking that photograph in 2007. It was almost introducing us to two different generations without even us realizing in the first place. When Lionel Messi made his debut under Frank Rijkaard in 2004, Barcelona wasn't his team. Ronaldinho was the king of Camp Nou. Every attack flowed through the Brazilian magician, while Messi was simply a teenager trying to earn minutes among some of the best players in the world. There was no pressure for him to become the face of the club overnight. He had the luxury of learning from a legend before becoming a legend himself. And yet, it didn't take long for everyone to realize that they were watching something very extraordinary unfold right before their eyes. Messi's first few appearances weren't defined by goals or trophies. They were defined by moments. A dribble that shouldn't have been possible, a first touch that seemed impossible to explain, defenders twice his size chasing shadows as a teenager danced past them with the confidence of a veteran. Ronaldinho himself famously told Barcelona's dressing room that one day this kid will be better than him. At the time, it sounded ridiculous, but today, it sounds like the greatest prediction ever made in football history. And nearly 20 years later, history has once again repeated itself. When Xavi Hernandez handed Lamine Yamal his Barcelona debut, he was just 15 years old. Think about that for a second. Most 15-year-olds are usually worrying about school. Meanwhile, Yamal was out there playing in front of 90,000 people at the iconic Camp Nou. Just like Messi before him, Yamal didn't look intimidated. He looked like someone who belonged in there. The first thing people noticed about Yamal wasn't his age, it was his fearlessness. He demanded the ball, he attacked defenders without hesitation, he played with a kind of confidence that simply can't be taught. It felt strangely familiar, almost like that Barcelona had seen this movie before. And just like that, the comparisons were inevitable. Every time Yamal got inside onto his left foot, people thought of Lionel Messi. Every time he glided past a defender, another comparison appeared. Every dazzling performance brought the same headline. Is this the next Lionel Messi? But that's where this story becomes different. Messi never had to live under someone's shadow. He was the one creating it. Yamal, on the other hand, had to grow under the shadow of Barcelona's greatest ever player. Every touch, every pass, and almost every missed opportunity was judged to his highest standards. And it was a burden that had crushed many players before him. Philippe Coutinho, Antoine Griezmann, Memphis Depay, Joao Felix, and most importantly, Ansu Fati. But here's the thing about Lamine Yamal. He never tried to imitate Messi. Instead, he went on to become the first ever Lamine Yamal, and perhaps that's why Barcelona fell in love with him so quickly. And then came another coincidence, or maybe just another chapter in football's perfect story. When Lionel Messi truly began establishing himself in Barcelona's first team, he wasn't wearing the famous number 10, he wore number 19. It became the shirt associated with his breakthrough years, the seasons where the world slowly realized that football had found its next big superstar. Fast forward to 2024, Lamine Yamal was also wearing number 19. Not because someone planned it, not because Barcelona were trying to recreate history. It simply happened. Two teenage prodigies, two left-footed wingers, both emerging from La Masia, both announcing themselves to the footballing world, wearing the same shirt. And the similarities don't just stop there. Lionel Messi wore number 19 in his first ever World Cup in Germany in 2006. 20 years later, Lamine Yamal, currently playing in his first ever World Cup, is wearing the number 19 shirt as well. Again, not number 10, number 19. The shirt number that represented promise before legacy. It almost felt like that football was leaving clues all along. Because for both Lionel Messi and Lamine Yamal, number 19 was never the destination. It was only the beginning of greatness. When Lionel Messi left Barcelona in the summer of 2021, it felt like the end of an era that would never be repeated. For over 2 decades, Messi had become more than just Barcelona's greatest ever player. He was Mr. Barcelona. Every attack revolved around him. Every season was measured by his brilliance. He scored 672 goals, won 35 trophies, and lifted 4 UEFA Champions League titles, and turned the club into one of the greatest teams of all time. For an entire generation, Barcelona did not make sense without Lionel Messi. But then almost overnight, he was gone. Not because he wanted to leave, not because Barcelona wanted to sell him. Financial problems forced the club into one of the most painful decisions in its history. And suddenly, the greatest player they had ever produced was wearing the colors of PSG. The image of Messi crying during his farewell wasn't just heartbreaking for Barcelona supporters, it felt like football itself had lost something huge. Football and life never wait for anyone, and the moment Lionel Messi left Barcelona, the same question echoed around Camp Nou. Who replaces Lionel Messi? Barcelona tried almost everything. They signed Philippe Coutinho for a record fee, believing he could be the club's new creative force. Antoine Griezmann arrived as one of the best world forwards. Memphis Depay was expected to lead the attack during a difficult transition. Joao Felix came with enormous expectations even before that. Ousmane Dembele, the current Ballon d'Or holder, had been brought in as part of Barcelona's long-term future. Every player arrived with the same burden. But, however, none of them could escape the comparison. None of them could take Lionel Messi's place. And maybe the greatest example of that was Ansu Fati. In 2021, Barcelona handed him the number 10 shirt. It wasn't just another squad number. It was the shirt that belonged to Ronaldinho before Messi, transformed into one of the most iconic numbers in football history. Giving it to an 18-year-old was a huge statement. Injuries robbed Fati of the continuity he needed, and suddenly the weight of that famous shirt became impossible to ignore. It was just another reminder that you cannot replace Lionel Messi just by giving his shirt number to someone else. You have to earn it, and that's what exactly Messi did during his time at Barcelona. People often forget that Lionel Messi didn't begin his Barcelona career wearing the number 10 shirt. He began his career wearing the number 30 and then transitioned into number 19. And it was only after Ronaldinho left he got the number 10 shirt. He wasn't given the shirt because of his potential. He had given the shirt because he had proven that he has earned it and he was ready to become Barcelona's next big player. Lamine Yamal's journey followed a remarkably similar path. When he first appeared for Barcelona's senior team, he wore number 41, then number 27, then number 19, the same number Messi had made famous during his own rise. It wasn't a publicity stunt or carefully scripted tribute. It was simply football repeating one of its favorite patterns. But just like Messi, Yamal didn't receive the number 10 shirt immediately. He had to earn it, and at the age of only 18, after breaking records, winning titles, and establishing himself as one of Barcelona's biggest attacking threat, the club finally made its decision. The number 10 had finally found a new owner. For the first time since Messi's departure, the shirt didn't feel like a reminder of the past anymore. It felt like the promise for a new future. And I think that's what makes Lamine Yamal's rise so unique. Barcelona didn't ask Yamal to become the next Messi. That is probably just impossible because what Messi has achieved for Barcelona, it's probably impossible to recreate as well. However, what Lamine Yamal has done for Barcelona is something much more important. He has finally given Barcelona fans the permission to dream again. For years, every Barcelona conversation somehow led back to Lionel Messi. Every failure was compared to their glory days, and every talented youngster was somehow just compared to Messi and his success at the club. It almost felt like that Barcelona were trapped into the shadow of their own success. But Yamal is slowly starting to pull them out of that shadow. Not because he plays exactly like Lionel Messi, but because for the first time since 2021, Barca fans are finally starting to talk about what they have instead of what they have lost. And maybe that's the greatest compliment you could ever give Lamine Yamal. He didn't just replace Lionel Messi, he replaced a feeling that nobody ever could. Sometimes the greatest moments in football are in goals or trophies. Sometimes they're photographs. Frozen moments that seem ordinary at the time but become priceless years later. Long before Lionel Messi became a World Cup winner, before Lamine Yamal became one of football's brightest stars, and before either one of them knew that they would one day share the same pitch, destiny had already brought them together. The story takes us back to 2007. FC Barcelona alongside UNICEF and Diario Sport were putting together a charity event to raise money for vulnerable children. Like many charity initiatives, local families were invited and were asked to participate through a raffle, with the winners earning a chance to meet Barcelona's first team players for a photo shoot. It wasn't an event organized to create history. It was simply just another community event organized by the club. One of the families selected was the Yamal family. At the time, Lamine was just 6 years old. He was too young to understand what was going on around him. He was too young to even understand who Lionel Messi was. His parents simply saw this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. On the other hand, we had a 20-year-old Lionel Messi, the same player who we now call the greatest of all time. According to photographer Juan Monfort, Lionel Messi was shy, nervous, and he wasn't exactly sure how to handle babies. So throughout the photo shoot, the photographer and Yamal's family had to guide Lionel Messi how to handle the infant inside the bathtub. It only lasted a few minutes. A few smiles, a few photographs, and then eventually everyone went back home. Messi continued building one of the greatest football careers of all time. Meanwhile, the Yamal family returned back to their regular lives. The calendar, meanwhile, served its purpose. It raised money for charity before quietly becoming another one of those charity campaigns in the history books. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. Over the next 17 years, Lionel Messi would become football's ultimate icon. He conquered Europe with Barcelona, broke records that once seemed untouchable, won 8 Ballon d'Or awards, completed football by lifting the World Cup with Argentina, and cemented a legacy that many believe will never be matched. Meanwhile, the baby from that photo shoot was just living outside Barcelona. Lamine Yamal wasn't trying to become famous with that photograph either. In fact, people hardly even knew that photograph existed. Yamal was just another kid making his way through La Masia, and he happened to be very talented with the football at his feet. By the time he reached Barcelona, conversations had already begun that if the club had finally found its next generational talent. Yet, the photograph remained hidden. It sat in family albums and almost forgotten by the footballing world. It was never shown in documentaries either. It was never shared on social media. It just became a simple memory, one that carried no special meaning because nobody knew how this story would end. Then came the summer of 2024. As Lamine Yamal lit up the European Championship and announced himself to millions around the world, his father decided to post an old family photograph online. At first glance, it looked nothing more than a nostalgic picture from childhood. But within minutes, football fans realized that they were looking at history. The image spread across the internet almost immediately. Newspapers, television channels, and football fans everywhere shared the same reaction. How was this even possible? Of all the children Lionel Messi could have met, how did destiny pair Lionel Messi with the one baby who went on to become Barcelona's next superstar? It sounded less like reality and more like the plot of a film. But perhaps that's why this story resonates so much with people. Because nobody planned this moment. Barcelona didn't choose Lamine Yamal because of that photograph. Lionel Messi never mentored him because of that. This image wasn't staged to symbolize a passing of the torch moment either. It was just another random charity event that was forgotten for nearly 2 decades before football gave it meaning. Looking back today, it's almost impossible not to see the symbolism. On one side of the photograph is a young Lionel Messi, a player with limitless potential but no idea what lay ahead. On the other side is a 6-month-old baby whose own football journey hadn't even begun. Neither of them had become who they were destined to be. They were simply two lives crossing paths for a brief moment before continuing in completely different directions. And yet somehow, those journeys kept moving forward together at the same time. Messi became the greatest player Barcelona had ever seen. Yamal became the teenager trusted to lead Barcelona into its next era. Messi inspired an entire generation of footballers. Yamal grew up as part of that generation. One unknowingly helped define the other's dreams, and now, after 17 years, countless matches, and hundreds of unforgettable moments, they are about to meet once again. Only this time, there won't be a bathtub or a photographer or a charity event. This time, it will be the final of the FIFA World Cup. And that's what makes this photograph so extraordinary. It just isn't a picture of a footballer holding a baby. It's a picture of football unknowingly capturing two different eras in a single frame, years before anyone had realized what was actually about to happen. Every great football story eventually reaches a moment where the past meets the present. For Lionel Messi and Lamine Yamal, that moment is this FIFA World Cup. After everything we've explored, the photograph, La Masia, the number 19, the number 10, and the countless parallels that we have drawn so far, it all leads here. It all comes down to the FIFA World Cup final. 90 minutes that somehow feel much, much bigger than football. For Lionel Messi, this World Cup final means a lot more, and it carries a different meaning than it does for everyone else on that pitch. He has won every trophy possible. He has won his broken records, and he completed football by lifting the FIFA World Cup in 2022 in Qatar. His legacy is secured whether he wins or loses the final on Sunday. But the great things about great athletes is that they're rarely satisfied with simply just being remembered. They always search for that one more moment, one more chapter, or one more dance to leave the game on their own terms. Whether this is Messi's final World Cup or simply his final opportunity to stand on football's biggest stage, it represents the closing chapter of a journey that began more than 20 years ago. For Lamine Yamal, the story couldn't have been more different. While Messi is writing the final chapters of his career, Yamal is only beginning his. This isn't a player who's looking to protect his legacy. Instead, Yamal is trying to build and start his very own legacy right here, and he can do so by lifting the FIFA World Cup at just the age of 19. He arrives at this World Cup by wearing the same number that Messi wore back in 2006 in Germany, the number 19. And back then, Messi was a young superstar, just like Yamal is today. And Messi went on to become one of the greats of the game. He went on to dominate football. Today, Yamal carries those expectations for Spain as well. History isn't repeating itself exactly, but it somehow always rhymes. And that's what makes this final so fascinating. It's always easy to market it as Argentina versus Spain or Messi versus Yamal, but those headlines don't quite capture what makes this final so special. This is a meeting of two generations of football. Messi became the player an entire generation tried to imitate. Yamal grew up watching his highlights, studying his movements, and dreaming of reaching the same stage. Now, instead of watching from home, he's sharing the same pitch with him in a World Cup final. Football rarely delivers endings this poetic. Some of the greatest players in history never had the opportunity to pass the torch on the pitch. Pele never shared a World Cup stage with a player who would eventually inherit his own crown. Diego Maradona never faced a teenager who would define the next generation. Even Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, despite defining a generation, never met on the world stage. Yet somehow, football has created this very own story, which is much more extraordinary. No matter what happens after the final whistle blows, this match has already secured its place in the history books. Not because of the scoreline, but because of everything that has led to this moment. It is a very rare moment in sports history where you get to witness the end of one era and the beginning of another era on the very same night itself. Sometimes football gives us unforgettable matches, sometimes football gives us unforgettable players, and once in a while, football gives us a story so incredible that it reminds us of why we fell in love with this game in the very first place. As beautiful as this story is, World Cup finals aren't won by symbolism, they are won by football. And when the final whistle blows on Sunday night, the photograph won't be remembered, the number 19 won't be remembered, the number 10 won't be remembered. Every parallel that we have drawn so far won't be remembered. For 90 minutes, none of that exists. What exists is Argentina, Spain, and the biggest prize in football. And I think that's what makes this final so compelling because for everything Lionel Messi has achieved so far in his career, this will indeed be one of the most toughest challenges of his career so far. And coincidentally enough, this could happen on his very last dance in Argentina colors. Of course, comparing a 19-year-old Lamine Yamal to someone of Messi's stature is completely unfair, I think. It's because Messi's legacy was built across 2 decades and it was built across consistency for over 2 decades, and it's something that no player may ever replicate in football history again. Yamal, on the other hand, still has an entire career ahead of him, and football has taught us that potential itself alone guarantees almost nothing in the sport. But I think that's why this final is so significant because this isn't about proving that Yamal is better than Messi. He isn't. This isn't about proving that Yamal can replace Messi. Nobody can. This is about witnessing the exact moment where one generation, the generation that we have witnessed for the last 2 decades, for 20 years now, passing the torch to the next one. That is the significance here. That's why this match feels different. Not because it decides a World Cup, but because it connects two eras. One player has spent nearly 20 years defining football, the other might spend the next 20 doing exactly the same, and somehow their stories meet here on the biggest stage in world football.